But now the United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. In the history of the world, no nation has ever been as deeply in debt as we are, the U.S. is.
Compared to his former colleagues, George Soros, Jim Rogers isn't nearly as wealthy or well-known. Yeah, that's because he discovered other hobbies that brought him happiness once he had enough money to never have to work again. But when he was at his best, he was among the era's most prosperous investors. The fund he and Soros co-founded, Quantum Fund, blew beyond the modest 47% return of the S&P 500 in less than 10 years, with an incredible 4,200% gain. Here's a closer look at Jim Rogers, his strategy for investing, and some life lessons we may apply. Who is Jim Rogers? Well, Jim Rogers rose to fame when him and George Soros co-founded the Quantum Fund in 1973. While employed at S. Bleekroder & Arnold, an investment bank, he got to know Soros. When Rogers and Soros founded Quantum Fund in 1973, it became one of the first international hedge funds. Rogers had begun working at the bank in 1970. The success of Quantum Fund was astounding. From 1973 to 1980, the pair's portfolio increased by an astounding 4,200%. Rogers earned so much money that he never had to work again. So at the age of 37, he retired. Rogers pursued other interests while managing his portfolio after leaving Quantum Fund. He toured throughout the world, moderated a couple of television shows, and was appointed as a guest lecturer of finance at Columbia Business School. Rogers set out a world-spanning motorcycling adventure in the early 1990s. His achievement of traveling over 100,000 miles over 6 continents led to his induction into the Guinness Book of World Records. He authored a best-selling book titled Investment Biker about his adventure. Later that decade, he and his wife embarked on another record-breaking trip, traveling to 116 nations in a specialty-built Mercedes over 3 years. Adventure Capitalist is a book he authored about these adventures as well. Over the years, Rogers has continued to be an active investor and frequently shares his market insights with the financial press. Commodities are one of his specialties. He established the Rogers International Commodity Index in 1998 to monitor future contracts for commodities on various foreign markets. Rogers concentrates on a certain nation, good or idea that he thinks has market potential. For instance, he shorted U.S. banking equities, home builders, and Fannie Mae in the early 2000s after predicting the formation of real estate and consumer loan bubble. After the Great Recession, Rogers became positive on agriculture, raw materials, commodities, and natural resources because he thought Asia would see rapid growth. Jim Rogers left Quantum Fund in 1980 and has since made private investments. He's not required to make his holdings publicly known. However, in an interview with the Economic Times early in 2023, he stated that he was not buying anything since he thought hard times were ahead. He said, "I won't be purchasing anything, though. In actuality, I was also carried away. Just like everyone else, I anticipated difficult times this year. I have essentially done nothing for a while since I know that hard times would come at some point in the next few weeks or months. And now I sit here and say that I regret it." Still, he acknowledged that he possesses commodities, silver and gold, saying, "If I had to buy something, I'd buy silver." Historical prices show that silver is far less expensive than gold. Occasionally, Rogers will also be interviewed by financial journalists. He gained notoriety in early 2023, for instance, when he forecasted the worst bear market of his life, rising interest and issue with the U.S. dollar. He said that he was still positive about commodities, such as gold and silver. During the 1970s, Jim Rogers and Soros made targeted investments that paid off brilliantly, resulting in extraordinary profits. During that period, he earned enough money to never need to work again. The story of Jim Rogers has several important lessons for investors. If you are an extremely knowledgeable person in your niche, focused investing can be quite rewarding. Rogers' life offers a potentially more significant lesson on knowing when enough is enough. Rogers had the opportunity to stay at Quantum Fund and grow into a multi-billionaire similar to Soros. Rather, he departed after realizing he had enough money to follow his other interests, which are traveling and teaching. With his family now residing in Singapore, Rogers made it plain that he was not purchasing anything since he anticipated difficult circumstances at the beginning of the year. The renowned investor believes that the next bear market will be the worst in history, made worse by debt that has risen unnecessarily over the last 15 years. The comments refer to the economic circumstance that preceded the disastrous financial crisis of 2009. The 80-year-old investor makes comparisons to the 1980 inflationary crisis in order to bolster their projections. In an attempt to combat excessive inflation after that crisis, officials launched a robust tightening of monetary policy, enacting significant interest rate hikes, raising them to 21%, and driving treasury rates to absurd levels. As a result, there was severe volatility in the stock market, and the U.S. economy was thrown into a recession. Even though the market looks to be in a solid rally, investors should exercise extreme caution given the scenario playing out in today's financial market. Given his expertise in using market volatility in his advantage, Jim Rogers' warning of a bear market cannot be dismissed. He co-founded Quantum Funds with George Soros in 1973, and together they saw the fund through several market and financial crises. According to Rogers, people and investors must exercise caution and evaluate their exposure to risk. The massive debt loads or similarities to past crises should serve as a constant reminder of how quickly market circumstances might worsen. The renowned investor thinks that the government poses the greatest threat to cryptocurrencies. The government will always use all legal measures to prevent cryptocurrencies from being successful because it seeks to be in charge of everything. Although his wife was a big admirer and had invested in cryptocurrency back in August 2022, Rogers reaffirmed that he would not make any more investments in that space. It will be government money if and when all of the money is on the computer, he declared in a recent interview with Bloomberg Crypto. Rogers does not believe that, despite what many have claimed, the entire globe will embrace cryptocurrency or switch to Bitcoin. Because of the constant restrictions in place, digital assets stored in computers will always be considered government computer money. The U.S. Federal Reserve has raised interest rates to a 5.5% peak at the quickest rate of increase. That's been successful in bringing inflation down from 4-decade high of 9.2% to roughly 3% in the process. Rogers reaffirmed in September of last year that despite the Federal Reserve's aggressive monetary tightening, inflationary pressures are far from over. Rogers claims that because government has printed so much money recently, the inflation problem will only become worse. Therefore, it still needs to be finished even if it has decreased greatly. The renowned investor has cautioned that raising interest rates by central banks in an attempt to combat inflation may have disastrous results. To begin with, it might be the catalyst that ultimately causes the economy to enter a recession. Jim Rogers claims that the economy would not escape recession because of the high level of inflation. The likelihood of an economic downturn is increased by the fact that the U.S. has been experiencing severe issues of the greatest period in history. According to Rogers, even though the recession may have already begun, there have been some positive developments along the way. So it hasn't been all negative. But given how much debt has increased over the last 15 years, things are probably going to get worse. Agriculture will always remain important, according to Rogers, even though the focus has been on cutting-edge technology like blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and artificial intelligence. Agriculture will always be a vital component of the economy and society. According to Rogers, agriculture still hasn't gained the momentum it deserves in the world economy, which means there are intriguing and substantial investment prospects. Agriculture has been a disaster for years, he stated, and usually, if you buy a disaster, things turn out okay. That's all for now. For more videos like this, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.